What's up, pimps? It's your boy Stonkman. I am present with Almighty, all powerful, all knowing Jesus Christ. Oh, loaded, 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 load and Savior God. What up, God, motherfucker? Football's back in action. Happy September. Hope you guys are ready. Football is here, the king of the American sports. And if you're not American and you take exception with me saying the term football, go fuck yourself. It's football all day, baby. Know what it's about. We in
Yeah, I
this
mean,
motherfucker.
football is like one of the greatest American sports here, and people want to call it soccer. They got this European thing, but this is a good story about football. I bought a Patrick Mahomes card maybe about 3-4 years ago for about $100. Now it's worth about $2,500 to $3,000. So you got to invest in sports cards. You got to know what you're doing here. Invest in sports cards and get involved in sports. Don't be an L nerd.
Yeah, sports cards are dope. I have another Patrick Mahomes card, not the same one that you have. You have the Donruss rated rookie Patrick Mahomes. That's the blue background. He's got the one with the little D on it. He doesn't have the O. The O is the optic. The optic goes for a little bit more, but it's still a great buy. That's a hell of an ROI, especially
I don't know
considering
about
he
that.
bought it 3-4 years ago. He said so. That's a good
I don't know about
ROI.
that. I got the Don Rush because I am the Don. I don't know about the optic. Gotta
Well,
get
you
the
might be the Don. You might be the
Don Rush
Don,
if
but I'm the
you're.
Don. I'm the Don Dada. So that's what you got to know. But anyway, no, the Donruss cards are really good. If you're into sports cards, you got to go Donruss and you got to get rated rookie. Mostly buy quarterbacks. Don't buy running backs. Running backs have like maybe 5 or 6 years in their prime, and unless the guy turns into Jim Brown, the card's not going to go up that much. Same thing with receivers. Receivers kind of come and go, but it's mostly the quarterbacks that do pretty well. Big market quarterbacks. I recently bought a Brady rookie. I bought a 2000 Tom Brady Skybox rookie, and that was a little expensive. I think that one was about like maybe almost $2,000 when I bought it, and now it's probably worth about three and change. The last sale I saw was about 31 or 3,200, so that's pretty cool. Then I have the Jeter rookie. I got the Shaq rookie. Um, yeah, I mean I've got a whole bunch of rookies. So John Morant's for all you basketball people out there. Got two of those. So the card market's good. It's a good investment. Obviously, you don't get any cash flow from it. It's more speculative, but it's kind of like art. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the card market, and football's back, which is great. We love football. But the reason I bring up football is that Forbes actually just released their top 50 most valuable franchises. And this list is 50 of the most valuable franchises in the entire world, right? So this includes American football teams, MLB teams, NBA teams. This includes all you Euro bozos. This is Barclay Premier League teams. This is Euro Cup teams. This is fucking everything. So you'd think like in terms of soccer clubs, you think about Chelsea, you think about Man U, you think about Man City, you think about PSG, all these clubs that are worth a ton of money, and all 32 NFL teams were ranked on that list, which is astonishing. So you're talking about 32 out of the 50. Here, let me check the math on this is probably nothing. It's probably like
Well, you know why, right?
64% of the list. There you go.
You know
I
what?
just did the math and I guessed it at the same time. Fucking crazy.
You know why
64%
NFL teams are
of
so
the
valuable, right?
top 50. Why are they so valuable?
Because when you look at other sports like the NBA, baseball, and everything like that, they have guaranteed contracts. NFL is one of the only sports without guaranteed contracts, so they should be valued more since they can just get rid of their players on a dime, and there's no liabilities basically if their players get hurt or injured, like there is in the NBA and their MLB. So I would pay more for a NFL franchise knowing that I could just cut somebody on the whim and I don't have that liability there, and as a detriment to my revenue.
That's a really good point, but at the same time, with the NFL, it depends on the position. Obviously, it depends on your skill level. If you're a quarterback, like most quarterbacks in the NFL, even if they're like decent quarterbacks, they all pretty much get guaranteed contracts. Receivers, not so much. Receivers, it's like half guaranteed, and then running backs, it's like a quarter of the time it's guaranteed. So usually, like if a running back signs a big deal, he'll only get like a quarter of the money, and then he'll get a lot of money in like workout bonuses and in terms of like milestone bonuses, like like a performance bonus. but the quarterbacks get guaranteed money. Like Deshaun Watson signed that like $235 million deal with the Browns, and that was fully guaranteed. And I know Lamar Jackson's negotiating his deal as well. And his deal is going to be pretty big too, I would think. But he kind of took a huge risk. Like he's basically just betting on himself this season. He's pretty much sitting there like, oh, I hope that I fucking don't get hurt. And I hope that I just light it up so I sign a crazy deal. So that should be interesting to watch. That's something that we're going to get to see transpire, and we're going to see if him betting on himself is going to pan out. Because apparently he didn't have an agent either for his deal. He was just straight up negotiating his own deal because I guess he doesn't want to give an agent 10% of, 200 million or whatever the fuck the contract value would be at. But he's looking for fully guaranteed money, and apparently the Ravens are not looking to give him that, even though Steve Biscotti, the owner, he definitely's got the money for it. That guy's fucking loaded. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I believe they offered him 5 years, 230 million. The Ravens, and he declined it. He turned it down, and he basically is betting on himself. It's kind of like the Aaron Judge situation when you look at it. At the beginning of the year, the Yankees offered him a contract, and he turned it down also. But it looks like it's going to pan out for Aaron Judge. So we're going to have to see throughout the season if it's going to pan out for Lamar Jackson. It looks like he's doing good. The first game of the season, the Ravens won. He had a pretty good game. So we're going to see if it turns out and pans out for him. Hopefully it does.
I think that Jackson's been kind of talking about some of this stuff on Twitter. It's sort of like a he said, she said situation. But apparently he responded to a fan who tweeted and mentioned him and said, oh, he was offered 230 million guaranteed. He turned it down. And Jackson was like, they never offered me that. So, he's trying to say they didn't offer him that. The Ravens are trying to say otherwise. So we don't really know the details of everything. But to be fair, if anything does get leaked, and it's something that he wants to get out, it's him leaking it because he doesn't have any agents or representatives. So it's either him or someone in his camp, like his family or, maybe someone he's like very closely friends with or like a confidant. So it's very interesting when that stuff kind of comes out because teams will leak shit and they'll try to make the guy look like a dick. Or they'll be like, oh, this guy's a diva. Like he doesn't want to play football. Fuck him. And they'll kind of do that to like have some leverage in negotiation. So, but some guys don't care. Like they just play into it. Like Darrelle Revis, the renowned corner for the Jets, and he also won a Super Bowl with the Patriots when they played the Seahawks. But Revis was kind of like that. Revis didn't give a fuck. Like he was like, "Oh, I want everyone to know I'm a businessman first. Like I don't give a shit. Like I'm getting my money and I don't care." So some guys will play into it, and some guys they really do care. So it's interesting to see. But I think Lamar, I tend to kind of believe him because I don't really see a reason for him to lie, and he's made it like abundantly clear he's there to play football. He's not as much as he wants to sign a big deal and he wants to get paid. I think that if they make him a really fair offer, he'll stick around. I can't see him leaving the Ravens, especially with like how well that organization's ran. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I tend to believe you there. I don't think they offered him the $230 million because that comes out to like $46 million a year. And I think Patrick Mahomes, he's only getting, I think he got signed a 10-year, $450 million contract. So he's getting 45 a year. So basically Lamar Jackson will be getting paid more than Patrick Mahomes. And they're not even on the same caliber of a quarterback. So I don't think they would offer him that. But then again, the salary cap does go up every year. And, you often see these differences between quarterbacks that are much better. They get paid less than the people who are signing the new contract. So maybe it is so. I don't know how the NFL salary cap has gone up over the years and how it's changed.
Yeah. So how much is that Deshaun Watson contract? Here we go. 5-year, 230 million. So that would be 46 million a year. And then he got a $45 million signing bonus. I'm looking on Spotrac right now. Spotrac is great for looking at these contracts.
That's what I'm saying. Wasn't Patrick Mahomes' 450 for 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't really make any sense.
What you have to understand is that the first guy to sign that contract, he sets the market, and then basically everyone else that's a franchise quarterback has to get paid as much as that guy, if not more. So that's how it works. Like you have to understand, Mahomes signed that contract. He was kind of the first guy in that wave to sign, and then after that, then it was Watson, and then a couple of these other guys, Murray, and so on and so forth. Russell Wilson, that signing obviously affected a lot of things. So it's interesting to see.
I mean, that's kind of bullshit, though. If that was the case, right? What I would do if I was an NFL quarterback, I would just keep signing short-term deals. Then I would just bet on I wouldn't sign these long-term deals because I would have other people reset the market instead of me. Because like Patrick Mahomes is getting massively screwed now on this deal because you got all these quarterbacks that aren't even as good as him or even as close to being as good as him, getting paid much more than he's getting paid.
And that's what a lot of the top guys do, especially outside of football and the NBA specifically. We see this all the time. LeBron historically has never really committed to a long-term deal. He's never signed a 5-year deal. He would typically sign 2-year deals with a player option for the third year. And then if the salary cap went up, he'd opt out. And if it kind of was stagnant, he'd opt in. And then that was it. So really what in LeBron's case, what he was betting with that like player option after 2 or 3 years is he's pretty much just betting that the salary cap wouldn't remain stagnant or go down in back-to-back years. And historically, he's been right. So he's been able to maximize his contract values by not locking himself in long-term. The NFL is a little different with that. I don't know if there's necessarily player options like that, but I'm sure that you could easily just sign like a 2 or 3 year deal. And then when the salary cap inevitably goes up, you get paid more proportionately. So, I mean, I don't see any reason why you'd lock yourself in for 5 years unless you really were one of those guys where you were like, oh, I really need the money, or you just wanted to put yourself in a position where you didn't want to have to worry about your contract all the time. I guess in that sense, it might be worthwhile. But if you think like you're Patrick Mahomes, you probably had a crazy rookie deal anyway. Even if you don't make any money for the rest of your life, if you invest that wisely, like you could very easily, get to age like 50 or 60 and have a net worth of like $200 million just from the rookie deal alone. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't like for some of these guys, I don't get it. Like why you'd lock yourself in for 5 years unless you just fucking piss all your money away. I don't see a reason to do it. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I could think of why you would do something like that is it only prevents you in case of an injury. And if that was the case, what I would do is I'd rather take out an insurance policy with maybe like a Lloyd's of London or some kind of insurance firm to protect me if I get injured instead of like, locking myself into these long-term contracts and giving up the upside there. I'd rather just insure myself in that regard instead of doing that. And I think it would pay off, for these players better. But have you ever heard of the platform Symbol? This app called
Oh, what
Symbol?
is that? I don't know what that is.
Oh, so like I was searching the web or whatever, and I came across this app called Symbol, and this is a total scam. So what they do is you sign up for the app, right? And then you could deposit, however much money you want, like 5, 10, 100, 200, 300, whatever you want to deposit. And you basically buy these teams, right? So like it has NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. You buy these teams and you basically own these teams. And then every time the team wins, you basically get a dividend from the team. So they'll pay you like $1 every time the team wins. So that will go towards your balance, and then you could basically withdraw the money. So the problem is with this situation is where is the revenue coming from for these dividends for them to pay out all these dividends that these people own from their teams? It has to be coming from people buying teams, and they're basically funneling funds from new investors that are buying these teams, and they're using it to pay out the dividends to these old investors that already own the teams. Because there's no way you could pay a dividend if there's no revenue from the team. You're basically betting that the team wins, but how are they earning revenue from that if you own the team? So it's this massive kind of like Ponzi scheme, and I would just like avoid this app and this company overall. They say in the news, and they have all this news in like press releases being released. Oh, they're backed by DraftKings, and they have all these venture capital firms behind them. But the business model just doesn't make sense, and I think it's all a ploy, and it's going to end up turning into a Ponzi scheme because I don't understand where the revenue is coming from to pay out all these dividends to all these investors that own these teams. And it just seems like it's this kind of like fake sports betting model, and they don't even have a license to be doing sports betting or doing these like fantasy drafts. So I think this company is like totally shady. I don't know why anybody would get involved with this. But what I did was I signed up and I tried to like, scheme the system. I signed up, I deposited $1, the minimum, because they give you this free team when you sign up. So I thought I could just sign up and then withdraw the money and like 16, 17x my money. Like I put in $1, I could get a $20 team and then withdraw. But then when I went to do that, they said that you have to basically trade $100 worth before you can withdraw the money. So then I just like took my dollar back and withdrew it, and then I just deleted the app because I thought I could like basically scam the Ponzi scheme, but it didn't work out. So I deposited $1 and then withdrew the dollar.
Yeah, that's interesting. So my main thing too is like, are they paying for the licensing rights for these teams? Like, how does that work? Are they just like, oh, you buy like equity in the Knicks? It's like I'm pretty sure James Dolan is not selling equity in the Knicks. Like he's been pretty adamant about not selling the Knicks unless he gets like a crazy offer for them. So how does this fucking app even work? Like that doesn't make any sense. It's not like you're buying actual equity in the team. So how could you make money when they win? That makes no fucking sense. That's number one to me. That's the first concern I have, and I think that's pretty valid. The second concern I have is that it looks like they're buying positive reviews, allegedly buying positive reviews, because I did see that Pro Football Focus gave them some like resounding rating or whatever when I looked at this app on the App Store just now. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Pro Football Focus is like a very reputable website, particularly in that like fantasy football space. So I don't know why they would put their name on something without kind of doing their homework. And the other thing is this, all Ponzi schemes, when you think about them inherently, the whole system is predicated upon paying out the new people with old people's money, early depositors in this case. And the way the Ponzi scheme works is that they pay out the new people and then they're able to show like a boost in revenue, and then they're able to secure loans or financing, and then they basically just use the loans or financing to pay out other people until they reach a point where they can't get any more financing or loans, and then they just start taking the fucking money like from other people, and then they never pay them out, and they just kind of wash their hands and walk away. So it'll fold up shop. I mean, I'm pretty much convinced that this is a Ponzi scheme just from what you were telling me and just from what I'm reading now online. It appears to be very evident that there's some type of Ponzi scheme elements to this, and clearly it's just like, how are they making money? Like that's the number one question. Like, how do they make money? And if your returns are astronomical or ridiculous for you doing nothing, there's something there. It's not like you own equity in any of these companies or these teams. It's not like stocks where like I could buy equity in Apple and I could turn around and sell it and double my money in a couple of years, or I could buy equity in whatever company and then tomorrow it could be more valuable and then I dump it. Like these are not income producing assets. They're not backed by earnings. They're not even backed by physical equity in any of these franchises. So to me, it's just Ponzi scheme written all over it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It definitely is a Ponzi scheme. There's no equity. There's nothing backing it. This is. I know you asked like how are they making revenue. This is how they say they're making revenue to support their operations. I don't necessarily believe what they're saying, but I'm just going to give their point of view. I still believe it's a Ponzi scheme after doing some analysis on how they say they get revenue to pay out the dividends, because it's simply not enough to pay out all the teams' dividends and all the people that have teams on the site. So they say they pay out the dividends through trading fees. So every time you buy and sell a team on the platform, like an artificial team, because you're not actually buying and selling equity in a team, it's just like this artificial kind of equity. They take a cut of the fee when you sell their teams, but in essence, they pay out. They only had 50 million in trading, and no, they only had 50,000. I'm sorry, not 50 million. That would be crazy if they had that. They only had 50,000 in trading fees, and they had to make dividend payments of 600,000 last year. So they're basically $540,000 in the hole in their dividend payments versus their trading fees. So there you go, right there. That doesn't make sense. The money has to be coming from new investors to support that.
That's got to be VC money or something. There's no way.
And they say they get ad revenue, but when I looked up the Google Analytics and looked at the traffic, the app barely has any traffic at all. So the ad revenue can't add up to that much. There's simply like not enough ad revenue to support that. So the ad revenue, I'm not buying that. The trading fees, I'm not buying that. And these two elements of their revenue, they don't add up to the dividend payments needed in order to make this successful. So simply they're taking money from new investors and paying it off to old investors. And this Ponzi scheme is going to collapse. I don't know when it's going to collapse, but eventually it's going to collapse when they run out of money.
Yeah, I mean,
And this is the thing that people
we
don't
talk
understand.
about
Like
this a
Ponzi
lot.
schemes can go on for a
Sorry, go
long
ahead.
period of
My
time.
bad.
Like they can go on for 10, 12, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years, sometimes Ponzi schemes. And, you look around, you say, oh, like this has been going on for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. It must be legit. No, like Ponzi schemes can go on longer than you think they can go on before they blow up and collapse.
Well, Madoff, his Ponzi scheme went on for like what, 20 years or something like that. I mean, it was astonishing how long it went on for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was at least 15 years. You're probably right. It was around 20 years that his Ponzi scheme went on. But yeah, a lot of these Ponzi schemes, they take a while for them to collapse. And yeah, Madoff, that's a key crucial point. Um, I don't know what's going on with Madoff. Is he even still alive? He had to be. He has to be dead by
He
now.
died. He died. I know he died. I think one of his sons killed himself. Well, Madoff is dead, but I remember reading this. Like his son like killed himself or something. It was like pretty bad. It's like kind of a sad situation. But no, yeah, he died in 2021. They said he became like delusional in his last days. It was like pretty crazy. But he lived in minimum security federal prison. Yeah, this is his son, by the way, Mark David Madoff. He he exposed. It says he's best known for exposing his multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme ran by his father. So very interesting. Yeah, he killed himself at 46. Um, it says his death. He was found dead in his apartment. This is pretty sad. He hanged himself from the ceiling, and it occurred on the second anniversary of his father's arrest. So, which is pretty sad. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, he
these
must have
Ponzi
been
schemes
really.
are fucking crazy. Like, and it's so egregious now. And I feel like people they need to wake up and fucking pay attention to what's going on. I mean, crypto really. I mean, crypto was like the biggest things, and it's not all of crypto, but it's like a lot of crypto. I'd say like probably 98% of the coins and 98% of the investments are just pure fucking bullshit that you shouldn't go near. But I think crypto should have really kind of seasoned people to like identify these schemes and to be wary of them. But I don't know. I think people they need to kind of wake up and be careful because stuff like this is around every corner, and the whole thing kind of really just reminds me of that what's the Tether. It reminds me of Tether and how Tether is a Ponzi scheme, and they just keep minting coins and they're playing the shell game with Bitfinex and Tether and moving money around, and none of the people on the board have like a finance background or even like a hardcore crypto background. So the whole thing just kind of reminds me of Tether and like just in terms of Ponzi scheme. And Tether, we discussed this before, but Tether, if you actually look at the market cap of it relative to the market cap of like Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, the Tether Ponzi scheme is a lot bigger, a lot bigger. So it's pretty wild. So theoretically, Tether is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time because it surpassed Madoff.
Yeah, I mean, the Madoff story is like a really interesting story. The Ponzi scheme that went on there. Um, you said earlier about how he died, right? Did you hear the story about the Bed Bath and Beyond CEO, or what was it, CFO? He also died recently. I think he jumped out
I
of a
did hear
building.
that. Yeah, I did hear that.
Did you hear
Yep.
about that?
Yeah, that was some wild shit.
Yeah, he basically jumped out of. I think it was a. They called it like the Jenga tower or whatever. The building that he jumped out of. It's some building in Tribeca, and there's like rumors going on about like how he died. Officially, it was ruled a suicide, but like there's people saying, oh, the stock, it's on the Wall Street bets. It was the stock's a pump and dump scheme, and there might have been some hedge funds involved that basically didn't like what was going on with Bed Bath and Beyond. And this basically might be rumors of like that the company was committing fraud, and that's why he killed himself because he didn't want to basically face the consequences of the fraud that might be discovered in the near future. But yeah,
Do
I
you
mean, Bed Bath
remember
and
this?
Beyond.
Do you remember
What
this? Sorry to cut you off. Do you remember this? This was years ago, and this is a little a throwback story and something that hasn't really been known. But way back in the day, when me and you had an interaction, and we're both big finance guys, both big investors. This was years ago. You probably might not remember this, but for people who don't know, there was a time where we would both kind of look at companies and we try to find value, and we're both big like value investors. And I found this one company, Chesapeake Energy, and they've since gone bankrupt, right? But at the time, they were trading at like a buck 25 or like a buck 50 a share. And I turned to him and I said, "Hey, you should look into this company, yada yada yada. Icon's got a big position. People are pricing in bankruptcy. They're not going to go bankrupt." Sure enough, they don't go bankrupt at the time. They end up refinancing. Stock goes crazy. Stock goes up to like $7, $8 a share. Then what happens is the stock tapers down a little bit because it was announced that the SEC was going to be investigating them, right? The CEO at the time was a gentleman by the name of Aubrey McClendon. And Chesapeake Energy, being an oil and natural gas company, was subjected to these SEC investigations, particularly Aubrey McClendon himself, for potential fraud within the company. Literally the next day, Aubrey McClendon takes his car and just drives into a wall and kills himself. The stock goes up, and then the investigation for fraud is just dropped immediately. And then that was it. It's fucking the weirdest shit I've ever seen with a company I was personally invested in and with someone that I know that I told to invest in it. It was the most bizarre fucking thing ever. The stock went up like 20% after the guy killed himself because the fraud case was dropped. If you remember that.
Yeah, so that adds reason to believe, like, maybe if somebody who had ownership in the stock, right, and the guy was being investigated for fraud and it was affecting the stock price and the market cap of the company, then that gives credence to the belief that maybe some monetary actor would push somebody off the building. It's a possibility. It's a slim possibility that since it was ruled a suicide and such. But you always have to look at different possibilities and then give a probability to them, and believe the situation that has the highest probability of what happened. But there is a small percentage that this is not a suicide, and that this was you know this was a murder, and somebody pushed them off the building. And I think they probably investigated that, and they came to the conclusion that it was a suicide, and maybe it was a suicide. Maybe there was fraud going on with the company, and he couldn't handle it. It's very stressful when you're being put in situations like that. You're being investigated, and he just couldn't handle it anymore, and he had a nervous breakdown, and he committed suicide. But that's the thing today, though. Like, a lot of people are stressed out. They have the wrong mindset. I think it's very important for people to have the right mindset, and depression is basically caused by yourself. You have to be thinking about different situations. Think about other people that are in worse situations than you. There's always somebody in a worse situation than you. And a lot of these people that are depressed, they think they're in the worst situation in the world, and that nobody has it worse than them, and that nobody can relate to them, and that they're like a burden on society, and they just have a terrible mindset. And I think you got to surround yourself with the right people that have positive mindsets, and you have to eliminate people that are negative, and don't be around people with negative mindsets. If people have negative mindsets, cut them out of your life. Don't talk to them, because they're a burden on your mental health. And your brain is the most important organ in your body. You have to have a good brain and a positive mindset. Otherwise, you're gonna have a rough life. You're not gonna be rich. You're not gonna be successful, and you're not gonna have a happy life if you're focusing on negativity all the time.
Yeah, that's big time. Another thing too that a lot of people don't really talk about is like you got to eat pretty good. You don't have to eat perfect all the time. You don't have to eat like a fucking rabbit or whatever, but you got to eat pretty good. Like you got to make sure you eat meat, you eat steak, you eat some chicken, maybe some fish. That stuff's really important. And then you have to make sure you exercise a little bit. It doesn't have to be anything particularly strenuous, but do cardio, do a little lifting. That stuff's really important, and that'll get you really happy. And I don't know about you, but after I lift, I feel fucking energized and ready to go. So that's stuff that you
You
got
ain't
to
got
do
the
too.
answers, Sway. You ain't got the answers, Sway.
What are you, Kanye? What are you talking about? You ain't got the answer, Sway. You ain't been doing the education, Sway. How, Sway? How?
You ain't got the answer, Sway. Yeah,
Yo,
Kanye though.
Kanye
Kanye just
is
left
the
Gap,
fucking
right?
man,
Didn't
bro.
he?
Yep, he did. He's done with them. He's done with those fucking bozos. I love it.
Why did he decide to leave Gap? I know that was a pretty lucrative deal, right? Wasn't he getting like some crazy royalties?
Yeah, he was getting good royalties. They gave him good creative design control, and I know he had equity in the company too. And he, funny story with him and Gap. A lot of people don't know this. When he was coming up and he was an artist, very early on, and I mean artist, like a rapper. But at that point, he was more of like a producer. He came up as a producer and then became a producer rapper. But he originally used to work for the Gap. So one of the first billboards and like promos they did, it was like a letter he wrote, and he was like, "Hey, I used to work for the Gap. This was the exact store I worked for. This is so fucking cool to be able to design shit for them and work with the company. That was like one of the first ones I worked for." It's actually kind of like a cool story how he like worked there and then became like this famous artist, and then obviously got into designing and then collaborated with them and made these hoodies and made a bunch of other stuff. But no, there were certain things he wanted to do and they weren't letting him do them. And then they were having these board meetings without him regarding some of like his antics and some of the designs that he had. And he felt, underrepresented in these meetings. And, rightfully so. He's the main draw, he's the main guy. Gap isn't exactly a relevant company. And he, with some of this stuff that he's doing and considering the equity he had in this partnership, they really should include him in the meetings and make sure that his voice is heard. And from his perspective, I get it. He's done very well for himself. He wants to be on his own. He wants to, deal with his own production. But look, the thing is, he's a good designer. He's very smart. He's business savvy. But I don't think he's got the mind for production. I think he's got a great creative mind, but I don't know if he necessarily has a great business mind. He's done well with Yeezy, which is obviously the bulk of his net worth now, and him being worth probably close to or north of $10 billion now, with how well those sneakers have sold and how well his music's done. But the reality of it is, he's a great designer, but he, like I said, he's not a good businessman. Because if you actually look at some of the ventures he went out on his own in terms of clothing or music or whatever the case may be, he hasn't done particularly well. um,
Well,
the
he has
the
ownership in
Yeezy
Skims, right?
clothing line. Well, the Yeezy clothing line didn't do well at all. Like, it actually kind of flopped, and he kind of abandoned it. Um, because his designs are like very minimalist, but so people aren't gonna pay $300 or $400 for a fucking black hoodie. They're just not gonna do it, or they're not gonna pay that much for a sweater. His margins were good, but he doesn't sell a lot of shit. That's the problem. He makes money because he does limited runs, but for him to get involved with production and all this other bullshit is like, he should not be doing that. He should just stick to designing things, slapping his name on shit and selling it. That's where you really make the money. Especially in his case, he can do licensing deals and he can fucking put his feet up and just keep pumping out designs. That's where he'll do really well. And I think, especially in his case, like he mentioned that he wants to design buildings and he's into architecture and he wants to design like college campuses and shit like that. Go for it, dude. If I was him, I'd do that shit. I would design these campuses, design these buildings, whatever the case may be. Sit down with like architects, kind of work on that, and then maybe you sell and you kind of license. That's what I would do. But I don't think he should get involved with production. He's a creative guy. He's not a business guy, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm gonna have to disagree there. I think he should get involved in production. Right now, he's only getting a 15% royalty on every shoe that's sold by Adidas. And if you look at like production costs and what it costs to make a shoe, right? For this is a report that was put out by Bloomberg a while ago. For $100 shoe, on average, it costs $25. Factory FOB cost, and then you have freight cost and insurance $1, and then $2.50 average for duty cost and customs cost. So the landed cost to you would be $28.50 for that $100 shoe. So that's in essence 30% cost. So you have a 70% margin. Then you have advertising and everything like that. But the problem is these big companies, they overspend on advertising, and Kanye is basically supporting the advertising for the whole entire brand of Adidas. Meanwhile, if he went out on his own, he could spend much less on advertising because he's Kanye. He could just make an Instagram post, he can make a Twitter post, he could go on the news. Everything he says is on the news. He can make a song about it, and he can eliminate the massive advertising cost that comes out of these shoes, that brings down the net profit. Because like a lot of these companies like Adidas, 30% of their revenue of a shoe is going towards advertising, and Kanye could cut that out. He can make basically, in essence, 60% margin on a shoe instead of the 15% royalty he's getting now. Granted, there is more risk. He has to, develop the supply chain, go to either Vietnam or China and get the contracts. And it's a much easier route what he has now, just collecting the royalty, because Adidas, Nike, and all of these manufacturers, they already have the supply chain set up, and they're skilled. They have the employees and everything to set this up, and it's much harder to do it on your own. But if you're making, 65, 70% margin versus 15, you could sell 4 times less shoes than you are now and make the same amount of money. So I think he would do much better if he just ventured out on his own. And I think, he's probably wise for doing so, because even if he sells half of what he's selling now, he's going to end up ahead.
And the Yeezys aren't going anywhere. It's just really the pain in the ass that he's got to deal with. Like you said, he's got to find suppliers, he's got to find manufacturers, he's got to find, who's his materials guy. And I'm sure he could probably poach some of these people from Adidas to kind of follow him, and he could do really well. But again, then what about the infrastructure of selling? What about warehousing? What about, getting to the consumer? Like, there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through with this shit. And he's done very well for himself. And, he's obviously a billionaire because of this, but it's a lot of work. And, I think the more lucrative path is definitely going out and doing it and setting up your own little infrastructure. But he's got a lot of people that are kind of standing in his way, that he's got to battle through. I mean, at that point, he's going to battle with Adidas, he's going to battle with Nike, he's going to battle with, whatever other big, I guess you could say, like, sneaker brands are. Like, he's going to be battling these companies, so he's got to figure it out. And I think that, in essence, like, announcing a lot of this preemptively is pretty dumb, because now these companies, I mean, they will work against you. As much money as he has, Nike has the same amount and then some. Adidas has the same amount and then some. So he's, he's really kind of, it's really kind of silly. Like, by announcing this shit preemptively, he basically put a target on his back without realizing it. But this is how he is. He's very neurotic. He says what he wants. He does what he wants, and that's what makes him great too, though. Because a lot of people that are geniuses, that are like super creative, like, they're the most neurotic fucking people. They're like, they. I always say, like, the greatness of, like, genius borders on the edge of, like, insanity. Some of the most brilliant people are, like, fucking kooky, like, they're crazy, they're super eccentric. So, and he's definitely one of them.
Yeah, I mean, Adidas, if you look at the market cap of Adidas, it's like 25 billion. You said he was worth 10 billion with his music catalog, infrastructure. He's basically worth half of what Adidas is worth. And I argue he's basically keeping Adidas alive. His Yeezy brand is one of, Adidas's only main selling points. And without Yeezy, Adidas
It dominates
would be in
soccer.
severe
Soccer's
trouble.
keep it's
And I don't,
soccer, it's soccer and Kanye right now. That's what's keeping them alive. It's
and
very
maybe
big in the
some
soccer
rappers.
space.
I know some rappers are probably signed to Adidas as well, other rappers besides Kanye. But I don't understand why these people like Kanye and even Steph Curry. Steph Curry just signed a lifetime deal with Under Armour for, like, rumors of over $1 billion. I don't know why these people just don't go out on their own and develop their own shoe brand. I get it. I guess I get it with Steph Curry. He's in the league. He has to focus on playing basketball. He can't set up the infrastructure. But Kanye West doesn't really. When's the last song that Kanye put out? He doesn't really make music anymore. He's focused on
He does.
fashion
He
and
put that song out with the game, and then he did one recently. He still makes music. He did that song with the leftover vocals from XXX Tentacion. It was like True Love. He puts out some singles. But he's an album guy. Like, he's not like Drake. He doesn't do an album every year or a project every year. He's like an every other year type of guy. But he goes through phases where he's like heavily recording and heavily editing and producing too. And then he'll just not record for like a year and a half. He's like a year and a half type of guy. Like Travis Scott's like that. Astro World was the last project he released, and when did that come out? Like 2018 or something like that. So, but he's a different case though. He's not going to put anything out for a while until that whole tragedy that happened at his concert kind of dies out. Like once the lawsuits and everything are settled, then I think he'll probably run to release Utopia or whatever project he's going to be releasing next.
Yeah, I mean, I think he definitely should start his own brand. I think he can do it easily, and I think what these companies are doing to him, Gap and Adidas alike, they're basically taking advantage of him. You look at some of the shoes that they're developing; it's basically the same design as the shoe he has, and they're just calling it something else so that they don't have to pay him the royalty. And it's vastly disrespectful to the creator, um, what they're doing. And I think you can't let that slip. If somebody disrespects you in a business deal, then you have to go out and destroy them. It's not even that it's much more work, and you might have an easier path, and you might be making this much money. Even if I made less money in that situation, which I don't think I'm going to make less money. When you look at the margins and everything like that, I would just do it just to basically get back at them because they're taking advantage of me and they're being disrespectful by copying my brands, not giving me the proper credit due for basically expanding their brand and making their brand grow.
Yeah, clothing is such an interesting space, and on that same topic of clothing, I don't know if you saw this, but that Patagonia billionaire, it was the Patagonia billionaire co-founder. He actually gave away the company, and the reason being that he gave is to fight climate change. So this is a really interesting topic. So Patagonia is one of these companies that, for those of you who don't know, they're very similar to North Face in that they mostly make outdoor apparel that's geared towards like skiers, snowboarders, and hikers. Well, it's an outdoor brand, I would say. It's comparable to Yeti and a very comparable. I actually would say more so comparable to North Face and Columbia, but they're very like kind of woke. So a lot of people they wear these Patagonia vests, myself included. I like them; they're very comfortable. They're very well made. But a lot of people wear these vests, and it's like a finance bro thing. And as a finance bro, obviously, I have a few of these vests. But the thing is that they typically will get these vests embroidered. So, like Goldman Sachs will get them, Bank of America, Citi, Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, hedge funds, private equity firms, etc. So they'll get these vests and they wear it, and then they wear like a nice button down shirt or whatever. So Patagonia stopped actually making these vests, like in terms of custom orders from anyone that actively deals with oil and natural gas companies. So they're very like politically active, and they kind of want to stop people from doing anything with that. But I will tell you this, which is kind of crazy, is that this guy, for him to give away the company to you know quote unquote fight climate change, I think it's just a PR stunt personally. So there are these things that maybe actually I want to hear your opinion on this, and then I'll tell you the secret, which is what I think is really going on. And this is something I'm a little bit more privy to because I'm sort of involved in the financial space more so on this side. And I've dealt with this in the past, particularly with clients that are like ultra high net worth. So I'd say net worth of over 50 million or more in terms of liquid assets. And I think I know what's going on. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, though, first about him sort of giving away the company to fight climate change.
Well, I think that the fact that he gave away the company to fight climate change is stupid, and it's asinine because, in essence, I don't really believe in climate change. To be totally honest with you, if you look at the Earth from its beginning, the climate has always been changing. It always will be changing, and I don't think humans are basically changing the climate. I think the climate is changing naturally, and I don't think there's enough evidence to support that humans are changing the climate through their policies. And this goes back to this whole climate change fiasco. I blame it on one person and one person alone who basically was able to galvanize troops and gain public support for this idiocracy theory of climate change, and that's Greta Thunberg.
What
and
about
she's
Al Gore?
basically
Al
no.
Gore
I
was like
have
the
to
first
put him
guy to
on
propose climate
Greta
change.
Thunberg. I'm sorry. No, no, Greta is definitely, she's definitely the one that, was able to galvanize the troops here. She was going like, "How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood."
She
And
played
a
that on
lot
the
of these
show. I
people,
remember
they
that.
took what she was. I know a lot of these people took what she was saying at face value, and they're not looking at why she was saying this. A lot of these scientific studies, they're not as clear cut as people would like them to be, and there's clearly motivations to push the climate change narrative. You basically limiting the fertilizer that a lot of these countries are able to have, and thus their food production goes down. Thus, they have to become reliant on the UN and other countries to basically get access to food. So a lot of people, the UN might want to have countries relying on them, third world countries relying on them, and I just think this whole climate change narrative is just blown out of proportion, and I think people that believe in this climate change narrative and they believe that the world habitable in 10 years, I think they should see a psychologist, and I think they should see a therapist, because clearly they're living in a state of delusion, and they're reading these IPCC reports from the UN, and they're accepting these opinions from these organizations, and they're accepting arguments from levels of authority, and they're not questioning that authority, and they're not looking at analyzing the data themselves. And I think they should analyze the data themselves, and they shouldn't be sheep going around, and they should understand what's going on in reality, because basically every climate change report is out there that somebody can produce. I can produce a report that says the opposite thesis. So I think it's a whole bunch of crock of shit. And I think this guy that's donating his company for Patagonia, who's donated his company to fight climate change, I think he basically drank the Kool-Aid.
All right, so this is one thing I wanted to tell you. You spoke about the UN and a couple of these other, like, sort of, I guess you could say, globalist organizations that are looking to fight or stop climate change. So you mentioned about production and sort of putting the world in a place where they would become reliant on the UN or any of these like global organizations. So I don't know if you know this, but the U.S. government, you could fact check this in real time. The U.S. government actually subsidizes farmers to not produce more than a certain amount of crops each year. So they actually actively give farmers money to not produce a surplus of food. How crazy is that?
Yeah, I did know that. Do you know why they subsidize these farmers to not produce food?
Why? Why
Because
do they do that?
they're worried about the cows basically releasing the methane gas and farting.
That's what it is, or are they concerned that prices will come down and then the consumer will end up having all the leverage
Maybe that's
because of the excess supply on the market?
maybe that's the case. You see a lot of these people buying up farmland, and uh, basically controlling the supply of food. Maybe it's because some of these people want us to go vegan, and they don't want us to eat real food, and they want us to eat this artificial food.
That's possible. Do you know what a DAF is or no?
Don't give a fuck.
No. So a DAF is a good guess. A DAF is a donor advisor fund. Okay. So
Oh yeah, I know what that is. Yeah,
this is some fucking crazy shit that 99% of people don't know about. So for this guy to like quote unquote give away his company, right? Okay. So great example of this is Bill Gates. So Bill Gates has this thing and it's called like the Giving Pledge or whatever, and it's for other billionaires to join it. They say, "Yeah, I'll do the Giving Pledge, blah blah blah." And they pledge their assets to the Gates Foundation or to whichever 501c3 it's directed towards. And in doing so, they pledge their assets to be given to, let's say, the Gates Foundation. Let's use Warren Buffett as an example, okay? So Warren Buffett pledged like a portion of his assets to go to the Gates Foundation after his death. So what happens is he actually gets an immediate tax break and he retains ownership of these assets in the form of this is a DAF where let's say Buffett gives away $30 billion to the Gates Foundation. He gets a certain amount of that 30 billion. I think I said million, but 30 billion. I'll correct myself.
Yeah, you can deduct up to 60% of your AGI
Yes.
on a donor
Yes.
advised fund.
Exactly. So he's able to reap the reward of an immediate tax benefit while maintaining ownership of the assets during the time of his life. And now what happens is he gets that tax break, but this is where it gets tricky is with DAFs, they have to pay out I think they have to have 5% payouts, but what they do is they do it in the form of salaries so they can just pay themselves. So it's this whole weird thing where they get the tax break and then every year they're able to recoup some of the money in the form of paying themselves a salary. So it gets really weird. And it's basically just a giant tax loophole and it's a sham because people will set up these like fake charities to put their money there so they get the tax break and then they're paying it to themselves on the back end. And it's just a weird shell game that they play, but it's all for show. It's all bullshit. They don't really care about actually solving any problems. They just want the immediate tax break and then be able to shelter their assets. So there really isn't any situation of them paying some type of like estate tax, right? Because right now the estate tax is 24 million for married people, and it's 12 million for individuals. So it's just about sheltering income is pretty much what it is. So for this guy, in my opinion, what I think he did is I think he underwent and set up a DAF. He gets his immediate tax break because he is a billionaire. He probably has a large amount of embedded gains or embedded income that he's going to have a big tax bill on. Makes sense. We're closing in on the end of the year. He'll get this done. The deadline to do a DAF is the 31st, so you have to file. It's December 31st. I should clarify. So he's like 2 months out, pretty much. Like he's basically 2.5 months out, 2 months out from this deadline. It's very coincidental he's doing it now. He also might file quarterly, so that's another big thing people got to realize. So yeah, I think the timing is very coincidental. I think he's doing it for tax break purposes, and it remains to be seen. But we'll see what happens. I think he's almost certainly doing it for tax breaks, though.
Yeah, you said before how a donor advised fund has to donate a certain percentage of their assets per year. That's actually not true. That's one of the benefits of a donor advised fund, that they have no minimum distribution limit per year. They only have to donate, I think, like $50 every 3 years for the donor advised fund to stay open. So they don't have a minimum distribution limit for a donor advised fund. That's why a lot of these
I thought it was
billionaires
five
use
percent.
donor advised funds versus
I thought it was
other
5%, and then what they do
charitable.
is they just do it as salary and like administrative.
For a donor advised fund, there's no minimum distribution per year. You just need to donate like $50 in a 3 year span, and that's just for the sponsor to keep you open, because like you have to have a sponsor for the fund, and if you don't donate like $50 or whatever in the 3 years, the sponsor you can't get a sponsor. So there's basically no minimum distribution for a fund, and that's why a lot of these billionaires, they use donor advised funds versus other charitable tax vehicles. That's like the huge benefit.
Oh, that makes sense. I just looked it up. It says, are DAFs required to make annual distributions? Unlike private foundation, DAFs are not required to make annual distributions. In order to avoid excise taxes, a private foundation is required to make minimum distributions each year equal to approximately 5% of fair market value of the assets. Okay, that's what I was thinking of. So the 5% is for private foundations, but that does not pertain to DAFs. That is so interesting. So something like the Clinton Foundation, hypothetically, of course, allegedly in a vacuum, if they were a private foundation that was not a DAF, they would have to pay out 5%. But in which case, hypothetically, of course, you could just pay out to yourself in the form of like administrative or a salary, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it has to go towards charitable purposes. I think it gets audited where the money's going. Like you have to donate at least 5% to a charitable purpose, and like an outside third party is supposed to independently review that and make sure it's going to a like a charitable use. And like the IRS is very stringent when it comes to these charitable organizations, and they review where the money's going. So I think you can't be using it for salary purposes. I think the IRS won't classify it as a charitable organization if you do that, and I think you might have problems.
Yeah, the IRS is not going to be too happy with that if you go about doing things that way, especially now that they're armed and ready to go. They're armed and dangerous, as Pop Smoke would say. But oh yeah, they're very interesting. It's becoming more totalitarian. And speaking of totalitarianism, I know your boys over in China, they've been doing some shit. We were talking a little bit about climate change, but you mentioned something about them using these paint brushes or something. They're painting these mountains. What the hell is going on with that?
Yeah, you would almost think they're Tom Sawyer the way they're painting, and basically these Chinese officials, right, in Fumin County, there was a lot of public backlash and outlash that there was a lot of dust in these mountains, and that the mountains weren't pleasing, and that there was a lot of pollution going on. So what these Chinese officials did in Chinese Yunnan province, which is Yunnan, if you want to look it up, they basically painted the entire mountain green, and like Tom Sawyer painted his fence. And this is just crazy to think about it. They spent $51,000, or basically 400,000 won, on this project, and it's just weird to me why they would paint this mountain called La Shao Mountain. And it's just awfully weird why they did this. And they did this to basically keep the public happy and think that they're making environmental changes, while they're at large, that they're taking climate change more serious, and that they're trying to get rid of the dust. And they did this through basically painting the mountain instead of doing the right thing and basically planting more trees and planting real trees. They basically, painted these fake trees on the mountain. And it's just awfully odd why they would do this. And I think, when you do something like this, it's going to come back to you tenfold. And because Mother Nature, they always knows the truth, and you can't fool around with Mother Nature. And I think like this and playing with Mother Nature, you play with Mother Nature, Mother Nature is going to hit you back 10 times harder.
Yeah, this is some pretty bizarre shit. I'm reading about it now. I'm even seeing an article in The Guardian from 2007. It says China takes DIY approach to mountain greenery. It looks like they painted this quarry green. Doesn't make any sense. Uh, it says the mountain's exposed rock covered in artificial green, the
Yeah,
color of astroturf, looms over houses against the scrubby background. Yeah, in this case, they're saying at least in 2007, this was one paint job they did. This was about 32,000 euros. And it says it quoted villagers as saying that if spent on plants and trees, the money could have restored a far greater area of barren mountain. Interesting. So this is an area that
yeah. I mean, this is
they're
common. This
having a
happened
large
as
amount of
2007, as you said.
heavy flooding here too. A lot of flooding in that region of China.
Yeah, I mean, this is very common. What they did, they did in 2007. They're doing it today. They do this a lot, and it's just like awfully strange why they would do something like this. I think the money could be better used towards either planting trees and doing other stuff. I think they do this, to prevent outside countries and outside, political influence from getting involved in their government, and their factories, and trying to regulate them through like political pressure. Because you hear that a lot about, like, oh, China is not environmentally friendly. And I think, like, if they paint these mountains greens, and they had pictures, like, they could kind of combat that narrative and say, oh, look at our nice mountains, look at our nice trees, like, we're very environmentally friendly. We have, nice oceans, and we have nice trees, nice mountains, we have nice scenery. And, meanwhile, it's not really genuine. And besides painting, they also put down like these kind of like tarp nets that have like bushes on them, like fake bushes. And it's just like a lot of weird stuff that they're doing here. And these projects, they're not cheap. Like, they're like $100,000 per project, and these projects are happening all across China. Like, it's not an isolated incident. Like, I mentioned that mountain, you mentioned that other mountain. Like, these projects are happening all over the place, and like there's millions and millions of dollars being spent on this kind of like fake environmentalist agenda.
Yeah, that's really
agenda.
weird.
And that's the
That's
problem you
very.
get into
Mhm.
when you try and like pressure people. You go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say it's really weird. Like don't understand, why would you spend money painting when you could spend like a tenth of the money or a quarter of the money actually planting trees? It's not expensive to plant fucking trees. Mr. Beast did that whole thing where, remember, he was planting a tree for it was like every dollar donated or something. What was that? It was like Team Trees. He planted like 12 million trees in like 2 years or some shit, right?
Yeah, and then like Elon Musk donated to it or something like that. Once he heard about it, like a lot of people donated to it. Yeah, planted a lot of trees. It was called. I'm not sure how many trees it was. I'm not sure how many trees it was. You said it was like 10 million trees. That makes sense. But Mr. Beast did it
I'm
like
gonna look on
he
their
cares about the environment. He
website
did a
right now.
couple
I'll
of
tell
things
you right now.
like that. Besides Team Trees, didn't he also do Team Seas? He did a lot of
Yeah,
things where he cleaned up
Team
garbage in the
Seas.
ocean. Like Mr. Beast he's a good environmentalist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on their website now, teamtrees.org. You guys could donate if you want, and they'll plant trees. It's pretty cool. It's for every dollar, by the way. $1 plants a tree. They did 23,967,767 trees have been planted. So that's pretty amazing. And I'm looking at the leaderboard here. Elon Musk planted 1,000,000 trees. Benioff 900,000. Plants vs Zombies. That's the video game. 500,000. Scott Chakin, 250,001 tree. Susan Wojcicki, 200,000. Jack Dorsey, 200,000. Jack Dorsey again. This was 2 days earlier, 150. BitCasino.io, 101,000. Sneaker Trees, a foundation with soul, 100,000. Discoveries in there. Mr. Beast did 100,000. Another 100,000. We got Verizon in here. PewDiePie, of course, 69,420 trees. What a legend. We got some good stuff in here. Good people. But yeah, anyway, pretty cool. But yeah, no, 23 million trees, basically 24 million trees. I'm sure he'll hit that pretty soon. But nonetheless, that's still pretty cool. And I think it's a registered 501c3, so you actually get the write-off for donating to this. So it's worth looking into. Looks like they planted some trees in Haiti, California, British Columbia, Arkansas. They did 1,000,000. Florida close to 1,000,000. Haiti 1.1 million. Montana, Michigan, Nicaragua. Wow, North Carolina, Oregon. This is good stuff, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Virginia, Washington State, Madagascar, Kenya. That's good. Mozambique, 1.2 million. This is good stuff. They're doing some good stuff for the environment. They're trying to build a better world, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build a better world, and we're trying to enlighten people and teach them shit that they might not know, in the form of sound financial advice and sound reactions to financial news. So, if you like to see more of that, be sure to hit that follow button. Be sure to click that thumbs up motherfucking button and watch our clips at the Anonymous Investors Podcast on YouTube. And be sure to go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere where you listen to podcasts and give us a listen and give it a rating, because we need more ratings. We have some good amount of ratings on Spotify and Apple, but we could use some more because that pushes us in the algorithm. So be sure to help out, join the cause, and thanks again.